Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Annie. Okay, right, sir. It's my pleasure to introduce Jerome. He's going to be performing from his second book, Aster of Ceremonies, on this afternoon. And yeah, please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, everybody. I'll start by describing the image on the slides here. There are on the screen is an image of a plant, a branch with leaves and flowers and buds, and the whole image is dyed in purple. Underneath the image is text in purple that reads, Elder chokeberry, Aronia arbudifolia. And above there's a typo in Aronia arbudifolia, which is my fault. I take responsibility for that. This is a page from the book that Josh just mentioned, Aster of Ceremonies, which was published last October by Milkweed Editions in Minneapolis. And I want to thank all the people who created the book with me, stewarded it with me. My wife, Louisa Black Ellis, who is an ecologist and poet among many things, and who copy-edited all of the plant names in the book. There are a couple thousand plant names that appear in the book. Again, this typo is my responsibility. Louisa did an amazing and meticulous job. Chris Martin, my dear friend, another amazing poet, edited the book. Atikwa Diker and Mary Austin Speaker designed the book, and Mary Austin Speaker designed the cover, and Bailey Hutchinson handles so much of the logistics of the bookmaking process. Morgan LaRocca, Shannon Blackmer, Daniel Slager also stewarded the book in various roles. Above the image of this branch of the plant, known by many names, including chokeberry and Aronia arbudifolia, I use the word elder throughout the book as a word of respect when referring to the plants. Above the branch is text that reads, "No book, all stutters." The text is in italics and it's black. So, you know, as Josh, you were saying earlier, I love the image you were sharing about currents and all the different currents that make up a river. And in the river of the book, of the work, there are many currents as well. One of which is I inherited my stutter from my mother, who stutters. She is She's from Jamaica, and she believes that the stutter came through her mother's side of the family. Her mother's name is Etta, and Etta's mother's name is Josephine. And I have, in this ongoing process that I was talking about earlier with Josh, in this ongoing process of finding different names for the stutter, one of the names I have found is Heirloom. And I like to think of the stutter as something that I inherited from my mother, and something that, like an heirloom, is precious and something that I can cherish and steward and may pass on to a child. And so one of the currents in Aster of Ceremonies, and one of its sources is me asking, as I was asking earlier with Josh, like, what does this stutter that moves through and manifests through and in my body, and that I steward in my body, what does it carry with it? Both in a genealogical sense, how far back in my family does this stutter go, but also in a sense that exceeds me and my blood family line. I want to think about the spiritual inheritances of the stutter too. And there are several spiritual ancestors of the book, including the poet M. Bessie Phillip. There is a slide up right now that reads, "Poet M. Bessie Phillip, Zong," and then it quotes, "telling the story that can't be told." M. Bessie Phillip's Zong was published in about, I think maybe 2008 or so, and for anyone who might not be familiar, it's a book of poetry that is in relation to a legal document concerning a massacre of Africans aboard a slave ship in the 18th century. This ship was called Zong, which the scholar Christina Sharp, as well as M. Bessie Phillip and others, write about. The word Zong is a corruption of the Dutch word zorg, which means care. And the ship captain threw overboard many of the Africans on the ship, and then there was a legal case that occurred between the ship captain and the ship owner, where they were suing each other over the insurance cargo, an insurance claim over the cargo, the people that they murdered. And then Bessie Phillip asks, how do you tell the story that can't be told? How do you tell the story of this horrific event when the only documentation that we know of is this legal case? So she, as she says, she locks herself inside of the text and creates a book of poetry by rearranging words and making anagrams of the words in the text. And so in this book, I apprentice myself to her method and apply a similar method to another archive created by those in power. It's an archive of newspaper notices in the US, in the Caribbean, in the UK. These newspaper notices were placed by enslavers when the people that they enslaved escaped. And they're often very brief, like a paragraph long. They're sometimes called runaway slave advertisements. And they usually list the name of the enslaved and what they were wearing when last seen, a reward amount, as well as any distinguishing characteristics that might help in their recapture. And there are many of these advertisements that concern enslaved folks who, according to the ad, stuttered or stammered or spoke with speech impediments or stoppages in their speech is the language that is sometimes used. And so I wanted to, I first encountered these advertisements in May or so of 2020, and I felt, a desire to relate or connect to these enslaved ancestors who are described, however, briefly. And I felt a relation with them as Black people who stuttered, again, in the evidence of these extremely instrumental and biased documents. And I wanted to find some kind of practice where I could be in relation with these enslaved ancestors in some way, while holding in mind I don't have the slide anymore, but holding in mind the insights of people like the historian Saidiya Hartman. She has written a lot about the complexities of relating to the enslaved through archives written by the enslavers. And in a recent conversation with the curator, Sophie Rose, I was thinking about, we were talking about how we were asking this question, can there be a practice of following the stutter itself and the way that the stutter can create other ways of assembling, other ways of gathering, as Josh has talked about, the way the stutter can create certain forms of gap and encounter. What might I learn by I'm assuming that the enslaved ancestors that I'm encountering in these advertisements For example, one ancestor named Lucy, I cannot be certain that she called herself Lucy. I cannot be certain that she would, I don't know what her relationship with her own speech was. And I am assuming that my desire to make some kind of contact with her through this document, I'm assuming that that desire may be a misled one or may not result in any connection. I also don't know if she would want to connect with me through those documents. And I don't know how she would feel about being written about in this book, the questions of consent and the ethics of this kind of archival engagement pile up. And so I have tried to ask myself, can I Josh and I have talked about this moment when a person who stutters is on a phone call and is stuttering on the phone call, and the person on the other end of the line assumes that the line has dropped, and so then they hang up. And in those moments, I was telling Josh this morning, in those moments sometimes I'll call back and say, hey, I speak with the stutter. And then they're like, okay, and then they don't hang up on me anymore. That's one way of approaching it, but sometimes I don't do that. Sometimes I don't call back, and I just leave it there at the hang up. Or I'll call back and I'll try again, but I intentionally won't make myself legible in that way. And there are each feels like a different relation to the gap. The gap between what the other person on the other line, what they think is happening, and what I think is happening. And I have tried to ask, can that act of dwelling in the gap and not resolving it into legibility, can I learn from that practice in relating to these ancestors? So I'll just share a little bit from the work and then open up if there's time for any feedback from you all. So the slide right now says Benediction Movement 1, the choir chants. The slide now reads in italics, where is the prose that will house our rigor? Where is the prose that will house our stoppage? The text in italics was created by rearranging words found in these advertisements, about 14 or 16 of them, full words and also parts of words. So the word prose is a part of the word prosecuted, I think. And the stoppage comes from the way that their speech is referred to. And of course, the title, Aster of Ceremonies, also removes the M from the word master, which appears often in these ads, and reveals the flower, Aster. And this is another example of following the stutter. When I was in speech therapy, my speech therapist, Dr. Bajoyan, told me that if I was stuttering on a syllable like am or b or p where my lips had to meet, I could try saying that first syllable very, very softly. And so if I was stuttering on the word brain, it could come out sounding like rain. And if I was stuttering on master, it could come out sounding like Aster. The next slide reads, where is the prose that will house our living? Where is the prose that will house our clothing? Clothing is spelled C-L-O-A-T-H-I-N-G because that's how they spelled it in the original advertisement. The next slide reads, not in italics, what name did ancestor Lucy call herself? We do not know. We honor her relationship to her own name. According to the advertisement, she, quote, ran away, close quote, on March 19th, 1797, on or near land and water, traditionally stewarded by, among others, the Sioux people, also known as Charleston, South Carolina. We honor the holiness of her speech and of her whole being. We thank all the plant elders for creating the oxygen she breathed. And I want to thank also the folks who run the website native-land.ca for providing the information about the indigenous peoples in the different places where these ancestors are living. The text returns to italics and reads, the stutters may endeavor to return to the creek. Stutters born before April was born. And something I've also been thinking about throughout the writing is the moment of the block when I am stuttering. Emnor Bessie Phillip writes about the father tongue and the mother tongue. That if for a member of the African diaspora who speaks English, if English is the father tongue, what might the mother tongue be? Mother tongue could be the African languages that I don't know what African languages my ancestors spoke. And for me, her thinking about the mother tongue has helped me think of the stutter as itself a form of mother tongue, and leads me to ask if the stutter holds space for the ancestors. Text in italics reads, stutters may be before speaks, may be before April, return may be before quest. Our reward is being in quest of stutters. There's a footnote here that reads, thank you, James Harrison Monaco, for helping me hear this. James is a friend who I've been friends with the longest in my life. Is the stutter an arbor of maybe? Longest in my life besides my brother and my family. Text continues in italics, the arbor of maybe made I into our. And then text appears in brackets that reads, the drip comes out onto the porch of melisma in the sun on a new morning. And this text throughout the book, there are sections in brackets, and it is a score or a description of music. And on the audiobook for the book, I don't read these sections, but I play the saxophone or the flute, or I sing. And because I'm with you all here, I can play the music here. And melisma, for anyone who might not be familiar, melisma refers to like vocal runs, when a singer sings more than one note per syllable. So I'll play a little saxophone. I'm moistening my reed, a little piece of wood that helps me make sound. I blew through the saxophone at the microphone and pressed some of the keys, sending my breath through it. The text returns to italics and reads, "The art of the stutter is to give away, being on time." The art of the stutter is to utter in time, not on time. There's a footnote here that reads, "I am so grateful to you, Ia Milta Vega, Cardona, one of my mentors, for teaching me about being in time." And there's more to text in brackets that reads, "Tonal sleep, 2-drop, perhaps, under swimming." text in quotes reads, stammers a little. And then more text in brackets reads, therefore the plumb line hanging from J-wing swings through syllable, clouds of syllable, a shred of nod, knowing. I'm going to skip through the rest of movement 1 and do a little bit of movement 2. So movement 2 of the benediction, and it's called a benediction because I am interested in the root meaning of the word. Good speech, and of course how dysfluencies of all kinds have, of course, been interpreted and treated as the opposite of good speech. And also because my grandfather, my mom's father, who died at the age of 100 in 2020, he was a reverend, and the last prayer of the service before it would end was called the benediction prayer. And I always really loved this prayer because of the language, but also because it meant that the service was over and that I could leave. This is like Black Pentecostal services, which are, not known for being brief. And so I would always sigh relief when he said it, but it was so beautiful. And then he would walk slowly towards the end of the church. And then when he reached the back of the very narrow storefront church, then the service would be over. I could take off my little bow tie and be free. So I wanted to carry him with me in the work. There's a quote on the screen that reads, "The proper name of God is a list." This is by the scholar Valentina Izmirlieva. And then begins a list in purple text of about 1,000 plants that grow in and around Charleston and would likely have been there when an ancestor named Betsy, who according to an advertisement spoke with a stutter, when Betsy escaped. And I wanted to think about the plants that she may have encountered in her time there, her life there, that she may have encountered for food or beauty or company or shelter or medicine. And I wanted to make a long text in response to the brutal brevity of these advertisements. And so it reads, "We belong to you, Elder New Jersey tea, Xenothus americanus. We revere you, Elder Big Cordgrass, Spartina sinusorioides. We praise you, Elder Late Flowering Boneset, Eupatorium seritinum." It goes on, "We worship you, we bow before you, we listen to you, we need you." Each plant's name is preceded by the word elder. And I then read the whole list to Louisa and Chris and James and recorded where I stuttered. The boundaries of where the stutter begins and where it ends are blurry, but I wanted to record in some way the way the stutter held these words and then brought the stutter into the typography of the page. And then there's a song that goes throughout here that's composed from the advertisement concerning Ancestor Betsy, as well as 7 other advertisements. I was thinking about practices in certain forms of Christianity where a saint is revered for 8 days straight.
A land so far off, for a name to grow. Each kernel of coffee has a name. Each green morning has a name. Each consequence, each no.
Sorry about that.
Each yellow window that rings with evening. has a name. Each name has a name written inside.
And on these slides, there's musical notation without a specific meter or rhythm notated so that the musician can choose the timing, and that the timing is not predetermined.
Stars, libraries of rhythm literature. No, it sees has asked which questions. No, it ceased to be empty. Has covered which questions. No, it seems not to be full.
So I'll stop there. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I don't have time to open up to the audience, but I'll be around if anyone wants to talk to me. And thank you so much to Josh and the University of Alberta and Danny. Or if,
I think we have like a couple of simple questions. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want just like it to be like done.
okay, perfect. Yeah, I just want to respect everyone's time. You know, I know it's 5:30, and I want to thank Nico and Danny and you all. But yeah, I'm happy to stay as long as y'all want. Just want to be respectful of time. Thank you, Josh. And it doesn't have to be a question. You could just share anything that you want, if you'd like.
Hey Jerome, thanks. My name's Mike. That was just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was really generous. I want to harken back a little bit to the conversation with Josh, and in which, after talking about clearings as a metaphor derived from thinking about forests and spaces, you talked a little bit about rivers and about currents and the recourse to streams and swamps in this space made me, of your performance, made me wonder if some of that was operative in this as well too. Is this, I guess maybe an easy way to just ask a question is to say, is this book, this performance space, is that a clearing for you?
Yes. Mike, right? Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, I think it is. Like, I think a question, so as Josh mentioned, this is my second book. The first book is called The Clearing. And I think one of the things I was thinking about when I was going to this second book was Josh's question earlier, like what is happening in that clearing, or what could be happening there. And one of the questions that led to was what, what like ecologically is happening there, what kinds of plants are growing there. And I live in southeastern Virginia, right near, like about a half-hour drive from the great a dismal swamp, which is much smaller now than it used to be, but it has a long history of indigenous stewardship and Black escape. There are lots of enslaved folks who escaped and lived in the swamp and were able to survive there, partially because of how inaccessible it is. And there are long histories there. And so that was very much a part of my, when I lived in New York City for 13 years, and I moved back home to Virginia, where I grew up, in 2021. And right after I moved back, I took to going to that swamp a lot, and that like is very much a part of this. And Louisa, as I mentioned, is an ecologist and a poet, and she loves and studies swamps especially, and has taught me a lot about them from an ecological viewpoint, also from as in relation to forest clearings. Swamps, have their own histories with Black forms of life, and what, like, something Josh and I were talking about earlier about, like, opacity and protection. That swamps are places that are often not easily traversed or easily controlled, you know. So the swamps have taught me a lot. Yeah, so thank you, Mike. Yeah, and I just say that where I live is just, in Norfolk, it's just like rivers and the ocean and bays, swamps and creeks and marshes. It's like, it is a place that has such a thorough relationship with so many bodies of water, so, yeah. Thank you.
We have a comment from online from Russia. She says, or they say, thank you for your amazing talk. I had an observation. The part where you spoke about your therapist asking you to be gentle on the first syllable of the words you stutter on, and that transforming a historically violent word like master into a flower, aster. It made me think about dysfluent futurities, where language itself may transform from a kind of epistemic violence that it harbors, the violence of the signifier, phallogocentrism, when I can use the feminist term. Cannot wait to read your book.
Oh, thank you so much, Danny, for reading, and thank you for the comment. Yeah, that is, that's so powerful, and yeah, it's like, I'm so grateful to Dr. Bajoyan for teaching me that, because when she taught it to me, it's like when she taught it to me, my relationship with my stutter was very different than it is now. Like, I had gone to speech therapy largely to try to like minimize my stuttering, and she taught it to me at that time. But it's like she planted a seed that is like I could not have foreseen all that technique would teach me. That was like 2012 that she taught that to me, so I'm very grateful to her. I'm grateful to you. What was the name again, Danny?
Rusha?
Thank you, Rusha. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mariam. Thank you so much for sharing all you've shared. I do have a question. As a performer, how do you think the experience of these like clearings can affect your body and is embodied through your musical expression?
That's nice to meet you, Mariam, and thank you for your question. Well, I think I love this question. One thing that I'm interested in, I was also talking this morning with Josh about this, is I've been reading this book called Hungry Listening by a scholar, Dylan Robinson. And in it, he writes about different instances where indigenous musicians and composers have been invited into collaboration with settlers, and he draws a distinction. He says that often the way that these collaborations have taken shape, of course, has caused violence to the indigenous composers and musicians, and one way in which that violence takes place is through the taking of indigenous content, as he says, but still within structures of understanding music that are settler understandings and colonial understandings. And he asks, and he's writing about like what it means to not just be on the content level, but on a structural level, to for a collaboration to change the structures and the ways that the music is understood, and make not just the content but the structures align with the way that the indigenous composers and musicians want. And so I've been thinking about this distinction between content and structure, and I've been thinking about how there are different forms of music in opera and pop songs, or just two fields where a stutter will be used as a part of the song, whether the singer or the performer is a person who stutters or not, or identifies as such. And to me that feels like I don't want to appropriate Robinson's idea. I want to think with it, and borrow from it. And if I'm borrowing this distinction between content and structure, that there are songs that I feel like they are engaging with stuttering as content. I'm interested in what it would be like to structure, to engage with it on the level of structure. So for example, even in this last song, as I said, like the score doesn't provide the specific timing for when the words are sung. I always sing it differently, which is not, is nothing new. But I'm thinking about, like as I'm performing it, I'm thinking about the specific forms of unpredictability that stuttering invites me into, and trying to like follow that in the way that I'm playing the music. That there are certain like traces that stuttering leaves on my body and my spirit, that are itself like can be likened to a score. So I try to like make music that stutters in a way, and I try to just like explore that in different ways. Like another example is a lot of the music from the laptop. Like this sound, to me it doesn't have a legible beat or meter. So like someone might term it like ambient music, for example. But to me, that word has value. But to me, part of what I'm interested in creating a sound like this is that it moves in certain ways that are unpredictable. Even to me, the one who made it, because I don't know when certain sounds are going to come in, and so to me, like the music stutters in a certain way, and I try to like, I try to just like live like in that music. Yeah, and another thing that comes to mind is there are different people who stutter. Sometimes they don't stutter. They stutter differently when they sing, and sometimes people stutter less frequently when they sing it, and that happens to me too. But I'm interested in thinking of it not in terms of like more or less, but like how can I sing in a way that is actually still guided by by the stutter. And these are all just like questions, like I don't really have answers for them, but they're like certain like practices that I try to practice when I am performing. So, thank you.
Well, thank you,
I-
Jerome.
There's one more person back here.
Yeah.
If we can just do one more.
Thank you for your, I don't know how to say, it was hypnotizing actually. I was drawn, and then because of the sound, it sounds like, okay, spring, and it comes the flow like with the strings, and I really like that part of the present, being present in the moment, and not having the bars to show like this is G, and you don't have even the alterations, like I don't know the name in English, but you don't have the alterations of the notes too, so it's like it's feel free for the tonalization you wanted. You can flow as you feel like, and you don't have time, so it's just like it's not you are not predicting, so that's amazing actually, because it goes as your own pace and own voice and tone, and yes, it's really amazing. I would like you to just talk more a little bit about that, and about the Aster of Ceremonies, because there is some religious and gods and about this Aster, this flower that is handled and offering, like as it's your offering as your Aster, as you put those flowers there in the altar too. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Will you remind me your name?
Sorry, my name is Isla.
Isla, yes, thank you so much. Yes, I'm glad that you connect with the way that the score is created. A lot of it is in direct study of the way that medieval European chant has been notated, that it's often notated like this, and they, often they don't even use the, like on the C here, how it's an open circle, but the rest are black circles. Often, of course, in those manuscripts, it's just black circles. And so I really love listening to different forms of chant, and chant as this kind of space between speech and song, and the way that different chant traditions, of course, not just in Europe, the way that they are attending to the breath and, as you said, like moving in one's own pace. And of course, when people are singing, when people are chanting together, it's there are certain practices that they develop, that involve like being, in attunement to when there is no, metronome or beat, how do you move at the same time as someone else, and I find those traditions very beautiful. So yeah, a lot of that is in direct honor and imitation of a lot of those manuscripts, and of course a lot of those chants, of course, come from, as you're speaking about, liturgical and ceremonial contexts, of course, often with nuns and monks, and yeah, it's something that, again, Josh and I have talked about for a long time, is like intersections between religion and disability. I grew up in like charismatic Christian churches that I left, and because I had so much fundamental disagreement with so many of their practices and beliefs, and I feel a lot of grief at not. I still don't have a. I still like am searching for ways of relating to the divine, to God, ways of worshiping that feel good for me. And this part of the book was very much a practice. It felt like a practice of prayer to write all these plant names and like have my encyclopedias open and to copy them down. And it felt like a devotional practice. So yeah, I was interested in the way that, again, as we were saying earlier, like removing the M from master brought me into this space of thinking about plant life and the earth. The forest has often felt to me much more like my kind of church, you know. So, or where I felt more relating to God in the way that I wanted to. So, yeah, thank you. And thank you all.
Yes. Thank you for coming, everybody.